Good morning. Welcome to this press conference at the UN in Geneva. Today I have the great pleasure and the great honor to have with us the Under-Secretary General for Peace Operations, Mr. Jean-Pierre Lacroix. I don't think we need to introduce you, USG Lacroix. He will give you an initial remarks on an update on the UN peacekeeping and mine action work, and then we will take questions. Vous avez la parole. Merci.
Thank you very much, and a very good afternoon to all of you. First of all, I will talk about mine action because what brought me to Geneva was mine action in my capacity of Under-Secretary General for Peace Operations. I also cover the UN Mine Action Service. And yesterday and today in Geneva, we have an event which is called the National Directors Meeting, which is essentially an annual meeting of senior officials from member states who are responsible for supporting mine action. So it's a very important event for us. It also brings together different stakeholders in the area of mine action, non-governmental organization, agency, funds and programs from the UN, and we work together to do our best to act in response to the scourge of mine action, the improvised explosive devices, remnants of war. We have a reality which is sobering, where the propagation of mines and IEDs and EODs has increased. Just in Afghanistan alone, just take an example, this is a country where we have a project. One person is killed on average every day by mine, and that person is most likely to be a child. And we have a total on average of 4,000 people killed every year, and many more injured. And again, most of these would be children. And the needs are increasing as a result of the hostilities in Gaza, in Ukraine, in the Sudan. We are seeing, again, an increased propagation of those devices. And therefore, we are duty-bound to see how we can respond to these challenges. At the same time, the resources are limited. We are operating against a backdrop where the financial constraints of our member states are real, and all of this on mine action is done on the basis of voluntary contributions. So you can imagine that it is something that is very, very important to us. It's a collective work with, again, the other partners within the United Nations system. Many of those agencies actually having their headquarters here in Geneva, and also with the NGOs and of course our member states. So just to say that on mine action, we've been very active lately. Turning to peacekeeping, I just want to say that our peacekeepers are really making a true difference, and they're doing this against the backdrop of increasingly dangerous environment. You've seen that in UNIFIL alone, and over the last couple of weeks, we lost 5 peacekeepers, 3 peacekeepers from Indonesia, 2 from French. Unfortunately, yesterday we learned with sadness the passing away of Caporal Chef Anissé Girardin from France, a second French peacekeeper who died as a result of the incident on the 18th of April. And I think that is those tragic incidents. We have also many injured peacekeepers as a result of the various incidents that took place in UNIFIL. Of course, we wish all of them a speedy recovery. And I, of course, reiterate my condolences to France and Indonesia and to the families of the deceased peacekeepers. That is, again, an illustration of the dangerous environment in which peacekeepers are operating. But I think it's important to highlight what they do and what the difference they make. I'm just coming from Cyprus, where for 50 years now our peacekeepers from HUNFICIP has been successfully implementing their mandate, which is to make sure that the ceasefire in the island will be kept. And that is exactly what is happening against the backdrop of incidents that are occurring on a regular basis, sometime every single day, sometime every week, and those incidents, all of them have the potential to escalate. And if they do escalate, then potentially violence could resume, and of course any chance for political negotiation to proceed and succeed would be undermined. So that's one example. Another example is protection of civilians. Every single day our peacekeepers protect hundreds of thousands of civilians. And I've seen that very clearly, very directly. For example, in the province of Ituri, northeast of the DR Congo, we have tens of camps for internally displaced persons. Some of them have 50, 60, 70,000 civilians protected exclusively by our peacekeepers, who not only protect them from security threat, but also allow access for humanitarian assistance. So we have our challenges, but I wanted to highlight the difference, the added value of our peacekeepers. The challenges are political, because we have a divided international community that doesn't help us and that doesn't help the political efforts that we support through peacekeeping. We have operational challenges with the increasingly dangerous security environment, with mis and disinformation and new forms of threats empowered by new technology. And of course, we have a financial challenge as a result of diminishing budget and partial or non-payment of all the assessed contributions that have to be paid by member states to peacekeeping. So I think I will leave it at that. That was by way of introduction, but I want to end by really paying tribute to our peacekeepers on the ground, and whether they're civilian, military, or police, and also to the other partners with whom they work. We're in Geneva again. Many agencies having their headquarters here. We work very well with them, day in, day out, with their colleagues in the field. I also want to pay tribute to them, and I will leave it at that by way of introduction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would also like to remind the journalists that we have sent you the statement of the spokesperson of the UN Secretary General on the death of the second peacekeepers that USG Lacroix was referring to. So let me open the floor to questions first in the room. Agnès Pedrero, AFP.
Yes, hello. May I ask the question in French? Oui? Ok, très bien. Donc Agnès Pedrero, Agence France Presse. Une question concernant le Liban et le mandat de la FINUL. Au regard des évolutions au Liban récentes, quelle réflexion vous menez au sein de l'ONU sur l'avenir de la FINUL, de son mandat, notamment en ce qui concerne son éventuel renouvellement après la fin de l'année? Et comment évaluez-vous la pertinence et l'efficacité de son mandat actuel? Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Alors, il y a deux parties à votre question. La première, c'est le mandat actuel et puis le futur de la FINUL. Je pense que ce qui est essentiel de dire et de répéter constamment, c'est que la FINUL a eu essentiellement, à partir de 2006, 2 mandats, pour simplifier. Le premier mandat, c'était de superviser le respect du cessez-le-feu et de faire rapport sur les violations de toutes sortes. C'est ce qu'elle a fait en faisant aussi de la liaison et de la déconfliction avec les partis. Et le deuxième mandat, c'était de soutenir, et j'insiste sur le mot soutenir, appuyer les autorités libanaises dans leur action pour mettre en œuvre le désarmement des groupes armés et atteindre l'objectif de la résolution 1701 du Conseil de sécurité, c'est-à-dire l'instauration du monopole des autorités libanaises sur les armes sur tout le territoire libanais. J'insiste sur le fait que c'est une mission de soutien. Il n'a jamais été question dans le mandat de la FINUL que celle-ci désarme par la force ou réalise elle-même le désarmement du Hezbollah. Je le dis parce qu'il y a parfois des malentendus sur ce sujet. Il y a parfois aussi des interprétations de la part de ceux qui savent très bien la réalité, mais dont peut-être c'est l'intérêt de présenter une version déformée de ce mandat et de cette réalité. Pour que la FINUL puisse faire le travail de soutien aux autorités libanaises, il faut d'abord qu'il y ait une volonté politique de la part des autorités libanaises. Aujourd'hui, c'est le cas, puisque les autorités libanaises ont pris des décisions courageuses dans ce domaine. Il y a aussi à présent des discussions entre Israël et le Liban, avec la médiation des États-Unis, discussions que, bien entendu, nous soutenons. Et cela ouvre un espace pour que la mise en œuvre ou la réalisation de ces objectifs, encore une fois, désarmement des groupes armés, instauration d'un contrôle exclusif des autorités libanaises sur les armes dans l'ensemble du territoire pour que ces objectifs soient réalisés. Et je pense que, de toute façon, les autorités libanaises auront besoin, pour mettre en œuvre ces objectifs, pour les atteindre, d'un soutien international. La FINUL reste là jusqu'au 31 décembre 2026 et elle est évidemment prête à intensifier ses activités dès lors que les conditions sur le terrain le permettraient. Il y a un cessez-le-feu relatif depuis quelques jours, mais tout de même une accalmie. La FINUL a déjà intensifié ses activités dans certains domaines, y compris le soutien aux populations civiles dans la zone, puisqu'il y a des populations civiles qui demeurent présentes au sud de Litanie. Il y a certaines populations qui souhaitent revenir également, nous les appuyons. Elle est prête à faire davantage pour soutenir l'armée libanaise et le gouvernement libanais dans des actions qui seraient entreprises par eux pour, encore une fois, avancer le processus de désarmement des groupes armés. Bien entendu, ce sera difficile. Il y a encore des résistances que vous connaissez de la part du Hezbollah. Il y a aussi des limites capacitaires de l'armée libanaise qui sont réelles. Et c'est la raison pour laquelle il faudra un soutien international fort au Liban, même si les conditions politiques pour la réalisation de ces objectifs s'améliorent. Il faudra également le soutien d'Israël. De ce point de vue-là, évidemment, le maintien de la présence, même le renforcement de la présence de l'armée israélienne sur le territoire libanais n'est pas nécessairement de nature à créer tout cet espace politique nécessaire pour que les autorités israéliennes puissent faire leur travail. Alors, pardon, rapidement, pour l'avenir d'une présence des Nations Unies post-FINUL, le Conseil de sécurité qui a décidé de la fin du mandat de la FINUL au 31 décembre 2026 a également décidé de nous demander, à nous, secrétariat des Nations Unies, au secrétaire général, des options pour une éventuelle présence des Nations Unies post-FINUL, pour soutenir la mise en œuvre de la résolution 1701. C'est important parce que ça veut dire que, du point de vue du Conseil de sécurité, la résolution 1701 reste le cadre politique d'un règlement. Nous y travaillons. Nous avons écouté les autorités libanaises qui nous disent qu'elles souhaiteraient garder une présence des Nations Unies, pas nécessairement identique à celle de la FINUL, avec notamment des fonctions dans le domaine de l'observation, du reporting, de la liaison, de la déconfliction, certaines capacités importantes, y compris d'ailleurs dans le domaine de l'action en matière de mines. Nous avons écouté, nous travaillons sur la base de ce que nous avons entendu de leur part. Nous avons également consulté, bien entendu, d'autres parties, Israël et d'autres États membres. Nous devons présenter ces recommandations au Conseil de sécurité avant le 1er juin de cette année.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Lacroix. D'autres questions? Et si, Jamie, that was your hand, hein? Associated Press, Jamie.
Thank you, Mr. Lacroix, for coming to see us. I appreciate that. Part of me would like you to say all of that in English, but we can keep it different. I wanted to just follow up on that. What, in terms of the two things, you mentioned that you need to have a strong international support for the operations, and I wanted to know how you see that. What could you be a little bit more concrete as to what kind of specific commitment that you expect from the international community? And secondly, just in terms of FINUL's been around since the mid-'70s, if I remember correctly, roughly, UNIFIL. And this is kind of the lesson learned question I think Agnes also asked you. How do you assess, the lesson from this, and what should the UNIFIL or its successor do that it's currently not able to do?
Yeah, I believe your question about international support is international support in relation to the Lebanese situation. First of all, international support to the political process that are currently ongoing, support to the political decisions that were made by the Lebanese authorities, which are difficult and courageous. Concrete support to the capacity building of the Lebanese armed forces, the Lebanese police as well, but also support that will be indispensable to the population, the humanitarian support in a country now where you have more than 1 million displaced persons, and which has suffered just a couple of years ago from a devastating financial crisis. So that support will be indispensable. And I would add also that Israel has to play an important role in facilitating conditions so that the Lebanese authorities will be able to do what they have indicated that they were ready to do. In terms of the lessons learned from the UNIFIL experience, I think the key lesson, which is something that we keep repeating, is that every single peace operation, peacekeeping operation, is created to support political efforts, the successful completion of a political process. But there's no peacekeeping operation that was ever mandated to achieve by itself the successful completion of a political process, the successful implementation of an agreement between conflicting parties. And why? Because it's up to the parties themselves to do this. And for that to happen, and we've seen that in many countries where that was achieved, like Cambodia or Timor-Leste, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Côte d'Ivoire, many countries where the return to stability was successfully completed and supported by peacekeeping. You need the parties to implement what they have agreed upon. And for that to happen, you need a very committed and united international community, because if you don't have that, if you have divisions, if you have some member states supporting one party and then another group of member states supporting the other party, this is what we saw in a number of situations recently, then those political efforts are unlikely to succeed. And that leaves a peacekeeping operation with what I call the intermediate objective, which is to protect ceasefire, to mitigate the impact of instability and tensions and violence, and to protect civilians. These are important achievements. They have to be assessed against the consideration of what would happen if they were to leave before the return to stability is successfully achieved. But ultimately, again, one of our colleagues used the metaphor of a ship, with sails. That these are the peacekeeping operation, but they need wind to be able to, and that wind has to be provided by the member states with their political support, not only to the peacekeeping operation, but also to the political processes that were there to support.
Have a follow-up? Yeah, go ahead.
Timely reference to ship because we're dealing with a lot of shipping issues at the moment in the world, as you know. Just wanted to follow up. You mentioned, I think, in response to Agnes about the June proposal. Can you just help us sort of get some contours as to what this proposal might be looking like, or what the debate is currently? I mean, frame it in a sort of a general way. I imagine there are not some details you don't want to provide, but if you could give us a sense. For example, one of the main issues, and this has been an issue for peacekeeping operations for many years, is whether or not, for example, the Blue Helmets will have the right to participate in disarming or have any role in that sort. I mean, are you seeing, will the successor basically be stronger than UNIFIL, or will it be a watered-down version of it, the way things are going right now?
Right. What does that mean, and what is the mandate given to UNIFIL by the Security Council in 2006 in terms of disarming? It's about patrolling, locating and identifying suspicious places where potentially there are weapons, and then with supporting the Lebanese armed forces in taking care of whatever would be found. And then for that, obviously, again, you need political support from and political will from the government of the host country, because otherwise the Lebanese armed forces would not have the kind of political guidance that would authorize them to do that job. So what happened over the last 20 years, basically there was no such political will because of the political dynamics proper to Lebanon at this stage. Now this is changing, but so without this, UNIFIL was able to do prevention, de-escalation, liaison, deconfliction. That worked well, and that was also recognized by our interlocutors in the Israeli Defense Forces, whom I met many times. But being able to access those suspicious places without obstacles to our freedom of movement, without being told, this is private property, there's no way you can go there, please choose the other route and all that kind of thing. That could have been overcome with the support of the Lebanese armed forces and the support of the Lebanese authorities. Again, that was not happening. But if you talk about enforcing disarmament by force, I think disarming an entity, which doesn't want to be disarmed peacefully, the synonymous of that is war. That is not peacekeeping. Forcefully disarming whatever group is called war, and that was never the intention for UNIFIL. That is never the and should not be and cannot be a mandate for any peacekeeping operation. It's called peace enforcement. Peace enforcement may be called upon and called for in some situation, then that is not for peacekeeping to do this. It's for others, and we're supporting a number of peace enforcement operations which are conducted not by the UN, by the African Union in Somalia, in Haiti, by this ad hoc sort of group of member states. We're supporting those operations in many ways, but again, it's different from peacekeeping. Also for a very simple reason, in addition to the first of all, I don't think that the Security Council would ever give a peace enforcement mandate to blue helmets for political reason. But the second is that I would have a really hard time finding troop contributing countries to do this, because it's a very different proposition if you come to a potential troop contributing country and telling that country, what about fighting a war in a place which is 5,000 miles away from your home and from where you don't have much by way of security interests. Of course, very different from peacekeeping.
Christian Ulrich, German news agency.
Yes, Mr. Lacroix, I was going to ask you exactly what the supporting role is, but I think you explained that now, looking for suspicious places and indicating that to the Lebanese army who would take care of that. Maybe there are other roles that you can expand on. But the other question is, peacekeeping is also not stopping an invading army or doing anything when one army invades the territory. Is that correct? Because that is one of the frustration of the Lebanese people, not the government or the groups, but the people say, we have UNIFIL here, but when the army comes and invades our territory, they just withdraw, or they just don't do anything. Thank you.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, first of all, the UNIFIL has been doing a number of other things, including supporting the Lebanese armed forces with the training, provision of capacities in different ways. Mine action is one, a number of other areas, engineering and so on and so forth. The other question you raise is important because it has to do with the problem that we sometimes face in terms of perception, particularly when situations on the ground change, because a peacekeeping operation is usually created in a certain situation where you have an agreement between two conflicting parties, and the role of peacekeeping is support the implementation by the parties of that agreement. But then if the situation evolves with, for example, the incursion of the Israeli armed forces in Israel Defense Forces in Lebanon, or with the growing influence and activities of terrorist groups in Mali, then you have that perception, okay, you're there and you can't protect us from those threats, which was also the case in Mali, because no matter how much our mission in Mali did in terms of protecting civilians in many ways, the fighting, the sort of offensive war against terrorist group is also not possible and really not in the mandate. But I think we have to, of course, manage this, because when a peacekeeping operation is created and deployed, then we cannot predict how the situation will evolve, 5 or 10 years from then. And I believe that at some point, it's for us and also for the Security Council to arbitrate, can a peacekeeping operation remain when the situation, which was initially a situation of post-conflict, becomes a situation of actual, belligerence? It's a real question. I think that we have somehow to sometime to be realistic in terms of, okay, can we still do our job, and to what extent or not? But with this, there's no clear delineation, because many of our missions, particularly in Africa, find themselves in a situation where you don't exactly have a full peace. You have armed groups. Armed groups are threatening the population, and we have a protection of civilian mandates. And in those situations, then, of course, our peacekeepers, if needed, act, including using force to protect civilians. It's part of the mandate. And I think that, having met with many civilians in many of these areas affected by the presence of armed group, usually the perception of what we do is very positive. They're saying, please stay and do more. But where do you draw the line between a situation which becomes impossible to manage, as opposed to a situation where we have the duty to keep protecting civilians? It's a judgment call. I think it's very much context-based.
Thank you very much. Let me go to the platform. There are more questions. Dina Abissab, APTN. And I take the opportunity to congratulate Dina. She's just been elected president of the Association of Correspondents to the UN in Geneva. So, Dina, congratulations.
Many thanks,
and please
Alexandra.
ask your questions.
Yes, thank you. Lebanon also, and the UNIFIL. Thank you for the opportunity. Mr. Lacroix, you are speaking about peace enforcement. And we know that Israeli occupation forces already occupied Naqoura, where the UNIFIL bases are based in South Lebanon. So how can UNIFIL support the Lebanese army and government in asserting control over the occupied borders, especially the so-called yellow line that Israel today designated without further escalation? And since preserving peace is at the core of its mandate, what is required from UNIFIL today regarding the Israeli aggressions and occupation of more than 50 villages in the southern Lebanon, and the systematic demolition of these villages? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's true that the headquarters of UNIFIL Naqoura is now in an area where there is a presence of the Israel Defense Forces. That doesn't mean that UNIFIL is not able to move and operate, even within limits and constraints. Those limits have somewhat loosened up since the beginning of this, what I call the relative ceasefire. Not full, but still better than during these active hostilities over the past couple of weeks. Some positions of UNIFIL are within or inside that area between this so-called yellow line and the blue line. Other positions are outside. What I have to say is that, on the one hand, currently UNIFIL, and that has always been the case, has a liaison and deconfliction channel with the IDF. That has always been the case. It's working relatively well. That has enabled us, that continues to enable us to conduct a number of operations, such as a resupply convoys to our position, and also a number of convoys aimed at supporting the civilian population. We currently have around 80,000 civilians that have remained south of the Litani River. Some civilians, actually more than some, are willing to return. It's going to be challenging to them. They will need support. UNIFIL have recently stepped up its activity in support of humanitarian assistance. We have done recently an operation at the request of the Prime Minister, with the support of the Catholic Church, and there will be others to the extent possible and within capacities. Now, if we think longer term, first of all, obviously, the presence of the Israel Defense Forces in Lebanon is certainly a violation of Resolution 1701, and I remind you that we operate under the political framework of Resolution 1701. And what I want to add to this is that the situation in Lebanon will have to be solved through a political agreement, and a political agreement that will be implemented by the Lebanese authorities, again with the support of the international community, and the Israel authorities and Israel will have to do what it takes to create the space and the political and practical and security conditions for that to happen. I think it's not very realistic to think that only military means will take care of the problem of the presence of armed groups and Hezbollah and their detention of weapons. It has to be solved through a much more comprehensive and political set of actions. Lebanese armed forces will have to play an important role, but disarming armed groups takes more than the military, the role of an armed force. It also takes a number of other activities on the area of, reintegration, socio-economic initiatives, and so on and so forth. So there's a whole set of actions and initiatives that will be necessary. And of course, again, coming back to the role of Israel, it will be critical that the Israeli authorities provide the kind of, again, conditions, security-wise, on the ground, political space for that to happen. And obviously, again, presence of the IDF is in Lebanese territory is a violation of Resolution 1701. Of course, we hope that that presence will eventually be terminated.
Okay. Dina, sorry, you have a follow-up, I see, and then we go to Reuters.
Yes, thank you, Alessandra. Thanks again. It's a follow-up indeed. Are UNIFIL's tasks military when it comes to disarmament of Hezbollah and humanitarian only when it comes to Israeli violations? Is it what you have said, Mr. Lacroix? Thank you.
Yeah, right. No, I think, again, I mean, what is really at the crux of the matter is the primary responsibility of the Lebanese authorities, and they are very clear in the sense that they are willing to fully assume these responsibilities and be empowered and take the necessary actions to, again, ultimately achieve the again, that objective of a full and exclusive control of weapons of the Lebanese authorities throughout the Lebanese territory. Now, that implies disarming the groups, including Hezbollah. And what that takes is, of course, a combination of important actions by the Lebanese armed forces, but also, I believe, other types of action in terms of making sure that the elements which will be disarmed will be reintegrated, which itself imply a number of initiatives in area of social and economic support. Now, another thing is humanitarian support. We are, as UNIFIL, playing a supportive role in the area where UNIFIL is mandated to act. There is obviously a need for an increased level of humanitarian support to the Lebanese population, given the number of displaced persons, given the scope and level of humanitarian needs. When I was in Lebanon together with our Secretary General Antonio Guterres, there was an appeal for humanitarian support to humanitarian action. There were some contributions that were announced. We, of course, continue to call upon member states to respond and support this appeal. Again, it's a combination of various actions and initiatives, and with the strong political commitment and support from, of course, the Lebanese authorities, but also those who can help and those who can also create conditions for that to happen. So maybe there is a space that can be opened for that, but we still have, obviously, still have a lot of work to do moving forward and a lot of challenges. Let's be realistic.
I'll take another question from Reuters. Emma Farge.
Good afternoon. Thanks for the briefing. I wanted to ask, as you prepare your recommendations for June, what is your view of the best option post-UNIFIL? And do you have a figure for how much of Lebanon is currently occupied by Israel? And then, if I may, a broader question. You mentioned the challenges you're facing across the world in getting financing for peacekeeping. What sort of cuts do you have to consider in the next year or two if the situation doesn't improve, and with what consequences for the civilians you protect? Thank you.
Now, in terms of the post-UNIFIL, we're currently in the process of working on these options. Again, we listen to the Lebanese authorities. They're the host government, so these are, of course, the most important interlocutors, and they're very clear that they would want to keep a UN presence. Again, not necessarily identical to UNIFIL, but they have an interest which they share to us, particularly, again, in the area of monitoring, reporting, observing, deconflicting, liaising. There are a number of capacities that they would want to keep, which we have been providing, or at least in which we've been providing a contribution. And so all of this we are factoring in the various options that we're currently preparing. Now, as you can imagine, this is all happening against the backdrop of an evolving political and security context. We have these discussions between Israel and Lebanon. We have the situation on the ground, of course, the impact of the recent hostilities, the occupation by Israel of, I would say, about 15%. I mean, don't take my word for it, the Lebanese territory, but a significant stretch of land north of the Blue Line with a massive level of demolition and no civilian allowed. Of course, we would wish all this to be reversed. That is not to say that we're not conscious of security needs, not only for Lebanon, but for the whole region. Obviously, a durable solution to the problem will have to take into account the security needs of Lebanon and of Israel. But that is, what we're currently working on in terms of the post-UNIFIL. And again, we have to factor in the possible further evolution that will take place, or that could take place, both politically as well as the situation on the ground. I think we also need to take into account what the bilateral partners are ready to do in terms of additional support to the Lebanese armed forces, to the police, which also has significant capacity needs, and also, again, humanitarian assistance. Now, moving to the cuts, well, I think we have two issues. One is the budget. In other words, the budget that are adopted by our member states for peacekeeping. We are aware that we need to make the best possible use of the resources that are provided to us by our financial contributors. We're also aware that most of our financial contributors, at least the most important one, have constraint in their public finances, and that's why we came up with budget proposals which present a reduction from last year. Now, another issue which is even more important is cuts because of liquidity, lack of payment, or partial payments. So we have had to cut to save 15% of liquidity, and that translated into a reduction of about 25% of the capacities of all of our peacekeeping operation, actually. And of course, that has an impact in terms of if you close a base where there are protection of civilian needs, and those civilians will be the less protected or non-protected. If we are less able to patrol an area, a line of separation, in the context of a ceasefire, then of course we may be less able to quickly react to an incident which has the potential to escalate. So these are the kind of impacts that we feel, that we see. We're trying to mitigate those impacts, but they are very real. And at the end of this month, we will meet with member states in New York and present more globally what the impact of those cuts have been, and also what we're trying to do to mitigate, but of course not erase completely these impacts. Now, as we move forward, of course, our message is to our member states, please, member states, be consistent. If you give us the mandates that you're giving us to a peacekeeping operation, you need to give us the relevant and adequate resources that we need, and you need to be consistent by paying what you have to pay. Otherwise, there's only so much we can do, and we will be very candid with you in telling you, member states, what the impact is of this shortage of financial resources, and at some point we may reach a position where in some cases we will tell the member states we cannot do this anymore. We can either not do what we're mandated to do, or at least we are not able to do certain tasks that have been mandated to us. Hopefully there will be payment in full and on time of contribution to peacekeeping. It's an obligation to member states. It's also a question, again, of consistency. These are the same member states which are deciding on our mandate and which are paying these contribution to peacekeeping. So we hope that there will be, again, consistency and full payment to peacekeeping.
Thank you very, very much. Okay. Just last question.
Sorry, thank you. I want to just follow up on Emma's question, because I do think that it bears a very basic question about sort of the contours of the post-UNIFIL. Your best option for post-UNIFIL. I mean, given the current state, you mentioned the funding issues and obviously there are political issues that are on the table. What is this going to be a smaller or larger force than the current UNIFIL? I mean, are we talking? Will they be able to maintain a mandate like they've had up until now, or will it be trimmed?
Yeah. First of all, as I indicated to you, I mean, we've listened to the Lebanese authorities, and I think, and I cannot speak on their behalf, of course, but we've heard them, and we saw the decision that they're making and they've made over the past couple of weeks and months. And the rationale behind those decisions, I think, is that they want to be empowered. They are empowering themselves. They want to be empowered by the international community, and they want to be supported, of course, for this empowerment to be actual. And I think it means that in terms of any future role for the UN, I think my understanding, it will be different from what UNIFIL is mandated to do. I think it will be probably, again, I'm saying this very cautiously because ultimately this will have to be decided by Security Council. So, you know, any future UN presence, uniformed UN presence will have to be decided by Security Council. But I think that we're looking at a presence which will probably be smaller than UNIFIL. At this stage, there's not much that I can tell you because we're really in the process of working on these options against the backdrop, again, of evolving security and political conditions on the ground.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot to everyone who has participated in this press conference. I'd like to thank very, very much Under Secretary General Lacroix for taking the opportunity of his trip to Geneva to speak to the Geneva Press Corps. Thanks to you all. Bon appétit. It's time. And thanks again.
Thank you.